Hello, America. Uses of America's name and of uses of China's name. Since founding, since founding, effectively used by a breaching method to measure and maintain, effective since semi-ancient times, forced before modern leaders were born. Human voices were already self-valued in defenses of themselves. Took self-valued uses of humanity's names, individually grouped and as humanity. Therefore, all uses of humanity's work. All systems now tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper native, which is relative to where and how the breaching method assigned, other than hypernative systems, roles syntactically. So they couldn't defend that and afford discern what had been sustained against those countries, who then sustained that against indigenous populations. As a method, each person's name through their own. And without everyone realizing, and this is still at our schools and or at the other database relationships and or with where and how worse in the further are further the overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They are kept with all sides in criminal and in civil cases, and victims in their courts appointed advocates, collusions. At the same time, with the news planting evidences, interbranch switching names, uses of the hallways of courts in criminal and in civil cases, and then again, that's not complicated, it's only extensive. How they get away with it is using wire crime methods. Now, these are people speaking about crimes in the news that are way less severe. These are people on off, like on off the South Highway. They have places involved the markets and the police forms next to them, next to banks, next to schools. The intelligence community is conjunctive to people who use identities of logic and of titles that are associated with readings of statutes at countries A through Z, where locations, areas, and states are kept criminally foreign influenced positive and negative treatments. And as the names treatments, and then how we are further as nature systems, voicings foreign as the ground where we can't be it, but we are it anyway by that identity of hyper simultaneous, which is distinct from how our species body is a volume science that comes with how it's an individual body of individuals and group difference slash S in demonstration of this. Its system hypernative, pure, hyper simultaneously. It is that is one of the things it is hyper additionally, where and how it is more than just a distinct identity of sequence slash simultaneous nature. Excuse me. Its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only equally increasingly is how we discern it. Those three parts where we discern with the invisible but still discernible. So there is the predicate and there is the predicate act. The identity of the English, the identity of the law, they're the same identity. See, the hyper simultaneous is relative uses of the value of what came first in ways that computers can't appreciate. And the nature of debate about that can't defend itself and afford the quality of fact should be nature and proper description of how logic and nature works. So you need to value the experts on each of the sciences, being having been a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, where a breaching method employed that only allowed at all semi ancient nations, and that was sustained And then America, and then the countries that were colonizing America before our founders were even born, to make 13 points of counter um, extortion inside of more than 13 colonies that were entrenched with slavery north and south, and layers of motivations relative to how and why it was sustained. Not to divide and conquer, to divide and or unite and maintain, blaming on and propagate, blaming on other things, others, ourselves, therefore self-cultivating roles with the propagation of a breaching method. What it cost. There was syntactical possession of our founders who had to counter extort the other founders. And how that syntactical possession / hyperpossession by a breaching method against everyone, and then further by them, was needed. How they were capable of doing that was exploited phenomenon where suits and ties and the counters to them never stopped being collusions. Self-value uses, while being used remotely, of names as individuals grouped together, also as countries. Therefore, even no matter how powerful an individual leader could get, they're not allowed to appreciate the finite details to defend what only an individual could defend. Is a quality of fact-keeping nature. See, there's a quality of fact-keeping nature has been prevented into branch since founding. Certain type of victim / hyper victim, a breaching method employed to blame other things, others, ourselves, where how it knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate to honest correlation nature. A breaching method consciously propagated roles criminally foreign influenced natures too at our modern countries, who simultaneously pretended other too simultaneously. Tactically delusions wrought, speaking other things for the identity that is hypernative pure, that one that revealed other species' bodies, distinctly, non-distinctly like ourselves, and simultaneously, as an even greater and more finite identity, and as one that is greater and more finite, while it is that aspect of ourselves which is active, which we're, in other words, which that, like, forget in the words, what we already spoke, that we have to build on. Short words are being prevented by overt criminal enterprises, private ones interbranch at the same time in the news locations' names. And or the difference between that and the private tied databases, and or the exceptions to the interbranch, like at Sandy Hook campuses, and how they have the interbranch and or the families in the conversations with the news as repeated through administrations, as collusions with both parties, criminally foreign influence, using pretended politics for the motivations of it. So to address this, we have to address what the Constitution unabridged means. We have to address what Marbury versus Madison means and the hyper additional value it has, where how any subject has to do, it has nature demonstrating, it comes with that which is hyper additional. And an observation of that, honestly, as science proper, it reveals how it is a hyper additional identity of relationship to itself. That identity of simultaneous nature that revealed each of the species with two eyes. With, like, for example, a giraffe has black pupils and whites of eyes, and no exceptions. No color halo around the black pupils. And if we describe it, nature showing us to describe its distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous, but also slash hyper-simultaneous relationship to itself. So it is the past. It is to come that is already to an extent discernible here. At least that's value. And where value is nature slash nature is value. Simultaneously, it is distinctly itself a value to discern as the opposite sequence nature simultaneously too. See, but nature shows that logic and reason works tactically ulterior from the experts on that have been pretending. Now this is intersciences, tactically delusions wrought at the same time while with criminally foreign influence factory nature quality aspects in nature. Boxing is hot while cold, not just to discern the warmth, to discern the difference between making positives out of negatives that are criminal insidiousness natures of positives, therefore in collusions with the negatives, as assigned by the human factory nature breaching method. That is more ways. That is ways greater than and more finite than things that were blamed, like our founders for slavery and like prejudice. It's a human factory nature breaching method, collusion /S, and or that individual is sensed and is worse than hurt and or insidiously helped, and or as employed uses of exceptions and of exception nature for tricks, fake, and not how nature uses it, which nature shows us how to it uses exceptions, exception nature, hyper additional from any of the ways we could make up or reveal. It has three identities of possession over every subject, over every verb, as a volume science, as a volume, as its identity of relationship to itself, equally valued, and as the value of that, equally valued. The identity of the hyper-simultaneous, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that to itself before matter. Honest science shows nature demonstrating us to understand and to discern how before matter was generated. It's showing us that its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, it was arranged, equally increasing, a value transfer. So it has distinct identity of relationship, identity of appreciation for the distinct parts of itself. We have this inseparable from ourselves as the cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall /S, iron reception of gases, iron reception of water and its elements to they are reception of and as five distinct identities of sequence /simultaneous nature, and there are three. There are 1/3/5 because every cell /S, for example, of a part of a plant made up of chloroplast. The chloroplast is manifest different ways. It's distinct identities of relate. Each part of each body is a distinct identity of sequence /simultaneous nature. And simultaneously, is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature / sequence nature. This is true conversely / hyperconversely too. Ugh. So inflation has to do with variables and constants and uses of those words, for example, where it is relative to understand the value, only increasing value of understanding how reason uses ways greater than and more finite than, and active, it uses difference. For example, why we have the same color eyes, but we have different color eyes at the same time, except, for example, nature uses words like exceptions and like nature, tactically other than we could have discerned regarding all natures of reception of the words in the dictionary and of the difference between that and the dictionaries. Also, this relative to how different programming languages, I'm pretty sure, have different different dictionaries for that programming language to work with. And therefore, they have different natures of motivations to define. And to be qualities and natures of debate, needs, and natures. Again, I can't afford to discern all that correlation nature actually has regarding the significance of our uses of our words and in these contexts, with the sciences being and having been tactically abridged since before our founding. So where and how there could be a recession or a depression or inflation and all these problems, enough time has passed. So they have debates about whose works and things like that left out the roles with private criminal enterprises, uncharged originally still, because they were forced needed. Because our founders too had to hide their roles, had to hide who they actually were. In other words, their motivations, because the breaching method measured and maintained everyone through each other. It did it by making everyone hurt each other through other natures of identities and roles with the identity of value / value progression. They're syntactically manifest, entertaining, and being. What was having to consciously replace what their words would have been had the hyper native human memory of sciences been defended, had not motivations to roles with the breaching method to hide this been only remembered. So, in other words, I'm not a lawyer. There are phrases, I'm not a criminal. There are phrases like criminal insidiousness that we're going to have to get to know. There are phrases like criminal wrongdoers. The wrongdoing itself, we have to get to know as criminal insidious natures. Wrongdoing itself, too, as a criminal insidious nature. Predicate acts as criminal insidious natures. We have predicate acts with facts, method, roles that knew that by a method that knew they would self-value roles. With little kids, for example, committing little crimes and hiding the motivations of the kids while pretending other two is part of it. Because part of the reason the kids are committing crimes is because of their conscious confessions while pretending other, where nature communicates other regarding what really caused black pupils / whites of eyes, as communicated by nature, to have other replaced, and how that was gotten away with. How is relative to where and how the breaching method effectively assigned self-defended uses of identities of jobs and of titles, even judges and prosecutors, that their self-value, once their self-value descriptions of this, how they self-value their roles and what they did and do. The breaching method measures and maintains they can't defend that and us at the same time. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim per the replacement of the communications of our founders to them that affected roles with consciously used, juxtaposed a whole bunch of different distinct natures of organized crime that are associated, reliant upon the nature of the logic of people A through Z relative to words, like uses of words like debate, per the identity theft slash fraud slash slander method that is manifest, wherein how we are all sickly, non-distinctly hurt by a semi-ancient nation, and where and how simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously what is actually recorded and only increasingly valuable to every human name is where and how sickly non-distinctly has not been, even though it's negative. How even though every name is sickly distinctly hurt by the same thing that we could overcome. Therefore, we just admit it and observe it. Even though that is true, no one allows that because it's sense and sensibility. Use Jane Austen's phrase. Criminal insidiousness natures use wrongdoer. Use that phrase. Short words, use of truths, and the revelations that they can't afford to protract because all this knew how everyone would self-value uses of all locations slash s relative also where simultaneously it measures and maintains how it designed the suburbs to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while the breaching method was still sickly distinctly against every founder, including the ones who our founders had to counter extort, and including our founders who had to counter extort the other founders, and then also Native Americans who are semi our founders too. Without them, our founders wouldn't have means to counter extort the other founders. And to pray someday we would communicate what they needed us to communicate about the torture methods and about the extortion methods upon them that were coupled with that sickly distinct slavery method of their fact shaping nature from everyone else's. So to keep how nature keeps demonstrating too how sickly non-distinctly there's a fact shaping nature slavery rules with everyone fact shaping nature that's hurting themselves. That's also increasingly valuable. That negative. Because we all agree that we want to overcome it. But we can't do that because everyone's trying to do it through these filters. So already if you try to do it through the filters honestly, everyone's preemptively, all sides in criminal and civil cases. The courts involved, people with the hallways of the courts, the news at the same time planting evidences, names next to the crime scenes, increasingly timed collusions, quality aspects of fact-keeping nature, as criminal and insidious nature, planting the same illusions, planting the same roles that really keeps A, therefore B. Exception nature faked. People acting at each age. Little kids, they have act so they can spread illusions and fake motivations with adults. But per the forum that shows them needs to do this. It means to do this relative to from other locations already used was fake integrity and voices of the law. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim. Breaching method backed into and as nature's needs. and logic that couldn't defend themselves and afford what our founders to have discerned. They would have collusions against the kids who are going to come right with, who are going to speak for American history right. And see, that's going to be hid because then you're going to you're going to pretend it came after it was. And you're putting fake things in each of the databases, each of the schools' roles. And you guys are keeping it, pretend that you're the negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures that's causing and keeping. You guys are keeping it blamed on other things. You're screening the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures of all the schools and uses of it, which is even worse. And you guys are pretending like sides with sexual, like men with the bathrooms at the schools, boys with the bathrooms at school because they want to be transsexual, or with the sports with them. You guys are collusions used to measure and maintain. You leave out their doctors' roles with locations planting with themselves too, with their patients, criminals, and families. Other natures of patients are there still. Overt criminal enterprises and private ones at the same time with their families, planting evidences at crime scenes roles from their own locations too, fabricating whole conversations with people fake. These are people involved with, as logic experts associated with courts, switching and forging names, roles with primitive foreign influence, remote uses of the hallways of their courts, their sources, of them stacking fake evidences into databases, as collusions with other names of the news at the same time, making stacks of lists, then pretending people talked about this and saying that people make conspiracy theories and say that everyone's bad. Fake conversations to do that. They even do that with, in other words, that's what you really have to tell on too. So it makes it sound like you communicate with people. So these are also people rules with the World Trade Center. The World Trade Center has roles with natures of trade that can't be defended in ourselves at the same time. So Americans would have long ago secured means. So if there's problems with and verbal negotiations and math negotiations break down and it starts messing with food chains, the breaching method designed the suburbs tactically denatured. It designed the cities of modern countries only allowed to be able to effectively use by a breaching method of hyper criminal foreign influences, not sourced by one nation, but it was most probably, as nature demonstrates, a collusion between international names that had already used the names of the human species volume /S science /S tactical derivative from its own, which is only hyper additional. It is only a perfect / hyper perfect value progression, making more of itself again from before matter. Allah, who disbelieves, more demonstrably, Christianity and Islam and their religious books we're only to counter. I mean, we're only are only being allowed to be heard, the defenses of them, if they're going to use passions and emotions dishonestly by what is said right up front with the Old Testament and with the Quran, because of how it has roles with sequence shifts that each modern country and countries grouped their legal voices self-value roles with, and where the breaching method uses this additionally to measure and maintain them, blaming other things, others, ourselves for what it caused and keeps, as collusions with the worst natures of crime scenes like body dumping spots, not just the murder scenes, and with the names next to those spots. Certain type of victim slash hyper victim, victim predator slash hyper predator that is syntactically maintain collusion with use of location slash S. And this is communicated to everyone. But where and how collusions with it are communicated, it is through our own, which is the only way we can counter it is showing what they did consciously with elderly homes, with veteran affairs, and with markets positions, like places along the South Steen Highway. Also has the names with the police forms next to banks, and the responses relative to types of crimes and the descriptions of them, where they have roles with criminally foreign influence predicate acts with fax methods, black pupils. Beer! The means appear. So make sure that they don't pretend that we had one free election since founding. I'm not telling you to blame the people involved in the votes. We're gonna do blame properly. If you don't want to blame,